as I kind of grew into business, you realize that like what I really like is making people happy and like creating products and services, media, that people are like, I want this. And you have that like addictive spark when you find traction and like you start getting sales and you find, opportunities for scale and like it starts popping, and you kind of become addicted to that. So, what the product is usually is kind of a byproduct of seeing what's a underserved audience and what they really want and being able to deliver that. I just love that whole process of business is kind of like a creative pursuit.
Hey everybody, welcome to CTO Confidential. I am here today with Ryan Estes. He is an investor, founder, and creator. You're based out of Colorado, right? So this is like a return for me to back where I lived in Colorado for about 2 years. But welcome to the show, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mike. Happy to be here.
Amazing, amazing. So I love to start every show off with your origin story. This is kind of where we kick it off. I said, what got you started on the path that you were today, kind of taking it as far back as you think is relevant, and I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, you bet. So, yeah, now, I mean, we'll start from where I am at right now. I'm building a holding co of service software and media companies, basically just to satiate my undeniable desire for the fidgets. I just can't stay in one place. You know what I mean? I got to do lots of stuff. So fortunately, we live in a time where we can facilitate that. So, my experience as an entrepreneur probably started from just having absolute miserable bosses and being fired a half dozen times from terrible jobs.
I've been there.
As a student, I was the kid that the teacher put in the back so I could just stand at the desk because I couldn't sit in my chair, So I began my career in music and was kind of a recording and touring musician and promoter, and studied music, audio engineering, and all that stuff. And so, kind of like the jobs I had were kind of coexisted with that, work in food industry, work in clubs, maybe a sales position here and there. And, notoriously, those places aren't necessarily like, the fulcrum of commerce. So working retail and things like that. So I didn't have like a great mentor. I didn't have a great direction. I just had all these examples of people I did not want to become and things I did not want to do. So that kind of put me in motion. I ended up founding Denver's first social media marketing agency, which was kind of on the back of the whole MySpace era. When I was making music, MySpace was really kind of popping off. And so I started, designing MySpace pages for bands, and then introduced me to kind of HTML and started making websites. I was like, oh man, I kind of like this stuff. So kind of went solo and had some success with that. Ended up kind of like, doing about 10 years with the social media marketing agency with my wife. My wife really managed the day-to-day operations, and I was able to, maintain the fidgets and started spinning off different products and services and things from there. Probably most known to folks in podcasting for my podcast guest booking agency called Kitcaster that I founded probably about 7 years ago. We did really good with that, ran up to a $2 million annual run rate. That company ended up being acquired about a year ago. And so I still have like a partnership role with the larger company that was acquired. They're called MoBurst. Absolute fantastic company, great leadership. We designed the agency, kind of the built to sell model. So we knew that in our future, at some point, this would be a great bolt on to a larger marketing agency. And we were able to kind of execute on that. And that pretty much kind of brings me today.
Very cool. Very cool. I think that, that's very interesting because there's a few things. Is one, I can relate to the idea of not having a mentor and having more bad examples than good examples. I think a lot of us really hope that we'll have almost a Mr. Miyagi type mentor that that we could say like, oh, they shepherded me into the career path that I'm in. But I worked a ton of just really crappy jobs and either got fired or got let go or got bored. that kind of thing. And ultimately, I always come back to those taught me a lot about what I do today, customer service, sales. So I'm very thankful for them. But one of my interview questions for anybody we hire is always, tell me about your worst job. Because I always feel like under the lens of your worst job is how I can expect your worst day to be here. And effectively, I always say every single day, even my worst day as a programmer pales in comparison to my worst day one of those jobs. So it brings you it kind of builds character. That's what I should say. And then of course this idea of you should know the end when you start. Like some people are building a company to last 100 years. Some people are building a company to sell. You kind of knew the end when you started then, that was going to be something you're building it up for acquisition.
100%. Yeah. And largely that came from podcasting. I got into business, when I was in early 20s, I was doing I was a painting contractor, and I spun that into like doing cabinets a little bit. So I kind of understood business from a very foundational level of people that would have what are considered lifestyle businesses. You have a business and you operate the business. You're the whole thing. So this idea of like creating an entity and like exiting companies and things like that, I had to learn all that. And I really learned all that from podcasts and then ultimately audiobooks and figuring out like, oh, okay, here's how you raise, here's how you create products that people want to use. Here's what I like to do. I love operating businesses, but I'm a systems and operations guy, a process guy. And ultimately I'm looking for outcomes that make everybody happy, which is kind of ironic because the music I made was like rap metal. It was like new metal and
like a Linkin Park kind of type of
yeah,
deal.
like a Linkin
Okay, that
Park,
makes sense.
Corn, Limp Bizkit kind of. That was kind of our era. I would say it was more in the vein of like the Roots and the Beastie Boys, so it had more
Okay.
groove. It didn't have quite the angst, but we would do like incredibly dissonant, horrible sounding music that I kind of took a certain pride about, like clearing the dance floor with just like the worst sounding noise ever. Um, but as I kind of grew into business, you realize that like what I really like is making people happy and like creating products and services, media, that people are like, I want this. And you have that like addictive spark when you find traction and like you start getting sales and you find, opportunities for scale and like it starts popping, and you kind of become addicted to that. So, what the product is usually is kind of a byproduct of seeing what's a underserved audience and what they really want and being able to deliver that. I just love that whole process of business is kind of like a creative pursuit.
It really is. And I would say one of the most frustrating parts of operating a business, what we've learned even just, running our agency, is the finding of it's not the finding of the first client that I say, that usually happens pretty easily. You usually have someone in your network or you get the one client that kind of gives you the idea that maybe we should go here, but it's the beating those boom and bust cycles. We were just having a podcast today where we talked about this idea of what product market fit means for a service business. And my definition was when your sales or your leads in sales exceed your ability to fulfill them. I said, that's kind of the dream. I want to basically be turning people away. I said,
Yeah.
that's, and so I asked you about your first agency. What was that kind of period like of getting into market and getting out of that, getting to the next level where it's almost like an acquirable entity? How was that process for you?
It was arduous and excruciating, I think, those 10 years, those
10 years.
early 10 years, it's like learning what people want, how to deliver it, how to keep your clients happy, and then how to acquire new clients, and, I'm a deep work guy. I love just like being in my hole and just cranking on something. It's so satisfying. It's like craft. But I think that ultimately, like my best skill is probably in, go-to-market engineering, which is what they call it now. It's just, I'm a sales guy. I'm a sales
Right.
dog and I like closing deals and, I can do it very well. So I realized, probably 7, 8 years into that agency that like I need to be in a sales position and I got to figure out how to acquire customers in a repeatable process so that I can then train somebody how to do it. I think I relied a lot on just like my natural talent and my love for people, to be able to acquire customers, but that doesn't scale. You have to be able to have a repeatable sales process. So kind of whittling it down to your point is like, hey, we have to find the right customer for the right service and be able to do it in a way that it catches fire and it's not dependent on personality or any of these kind of attributes. So that took a really long time, and of course that's something that grows and evolves and I'm still working on it all the time. But just kind of the understanding that like, you can't do the whole thing to get where you want to go. I guess it's kind of like, the ride that took you to the dance isn't the ticket to get you in the door.
Right, right.
And that kind of like really sunk in, and I realized that I had to start building structure and I had to start, building company culture and figuring out that aspect of it. And kind of that's I think still very instrumental, especially now when people are, folks, I've got folks all over the planet Earth in different time zones and we're all working from home or working from shared workspace. Like how do you coalesce all that all together to be able to deliver to clients in ways that they absolutely love?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is kind of the challenge. The thing that we always look at is the road to getting to like $1 million in revenue a year is like a first kind of arduousness, and then I feel like there's a next level which is trying to get into that 3 to 5 or and above, and we've talked about this, and it's sort of the point at which you can become, there's a reasonable acquisition target, especially for with the multiples. When you're actually looking at, you've built something that could be acquired for a multiple. And as I've worked with a lot of small businesses, some just never get out of that. They stay in that million for they're basically an entire career, 25, 30 years. They either pass it on to a child or they sell it for effectively 1x revenue. And that's kind of like all that it ends up becoming. And I think one of our biggest fears in building our agency is not getting that process piece down, getting away from the idea of we're the founders and what are the repeatable pieces. And I wonder if you perhaps you almost don't need to figure it out right away. But the next piece of that I think makes it a little bit easier is if you've isolated some kind of a niche that works. How do you go about finding that kind of like the piece of the product? Did you find that? How did you go about finding it? Did it sort of present itself to you, or did you really go after a vision from day one and stay true to it?
Yeah, it probably evolves. It's like you got to have a couple of things for me to validate a project. It has to be an area that I feel like I have expertise in, because that'll give me insights. It has to have some kind of distribution on the cap table. Usually that's me in some capacity, but if not, it needs to have distribution, and it has to have some kind of defensible moat, which maybe traditionally was like technology. Now that's kind of questionable of what that is, but it could be customer relationships and things like that. So I figured out after some failed projects, that really I need to probably sell to people like me, because I know what I like. And so I'm like, I like this, then somebody else might like it too, because the problem is if I'm selling to people that are not like me, they're probably not going to like what I like. And I'll give you a couple examples. I had a brand that I was validating called Poppin' Cookies, and it was completely existed on SMS. So you'd get a text with these beautiful cookies. You could place your order. So it'd be like $20 for 3 cookies. It's almost Crumble's model, but for some reason I wanted to put it all into SMS. It failed miserably. I was working on a product called the Blillo, and it was a blanket pillow. Okay. And so what it was actually was kind of like this like cool kind of fabric that you could put your old pillows into, and it turned into kind of like a futon of sorts, a blanket
Okay.
pillow. Nobody liked that either. So I did, I love inventing, and I worked on a deodorant product that was an all natural deodorant. A couple of people really liked it, but it did not sell because it didn't work that good. People,
Yeah. if you've ever been through the deodorant aisle at Whole Foods, you will. I can tell you from experience, they pretty much all don't work. I remember standing at. It's a funny story. I was standing at Whole Foods one time, kind of on this natural deodorant thing, and standing next to another guy who was doing the same thing as me. We're both looking at it side by side, and he goes, "So which ones have you tried?" And I was like, these 4 over here, or whatever. And he's like, "Yeah, I've tried these 5." I was like, "They didn't work?" He goes, "No, they didn't work." I was like, "So I guess we're going to CVS in a little bit."
Exactly.
Because it was one of those. It was a funny moment that I remember. It's just funny that you bring up the natural deodorant product, because I think that everybody's kind of heard the aluminum, and you don't want to get exposed, but then you're just like, but I also don't want to smell bad.
Yeah.
So,
Do I want to stink or have cancer? I mean, cancer is tomorrow's problem. I can't stink today.
that's right. You might not make that sale if you walk in there stinky.
Yeah.
That is,
Yeah.
that's funny. That's funny. It's interesting. So you've really been through a lot. You've done like physical products, digital products, marketing products,
Software. Yeah. You name it. I really like to dabble. I'll mention one other one that was kind of interesting because it was like a great product. It was called Career Funded, and it was crowdfunding for service businesses. Because I thought back to my times when I was a painting contractor, and I was like, man, I just don't know how to get the money together for a van. I was like doing everything out of a Volvo, and I could have grown and expanded that business. I just didn't have the capital to do it. So it's an uninvestable business when your revenues are $6,000 a month or whatever I was doing back then, scraping by playing guitar, great times. But I was like, how can these guys, how could me when I was 19, 20 years old, how could I put things together? Well, I put together this crowdfunding platform, a software where they could do that. They could pre-sell their services and then use that capital, invest in the business and scale up. And we had some initial success, but by about 18 months, I realized that for contractors and service professionals, creating marketing campaigns for their crowdfunding campaign, they just couldn't do it. They just didn't have the digital skills to be able to pull that off. So there was way too much on the service end. So I pulled the plug in like 2019. But, flash forward to March of 2020 when everything shut down, the amount of cash I could have made just from barbers pre-selling like a dozen haircuts so all those guys could keep the lights on, it would have absolutely killed. So that was a big learning lesson because it's like, sometimes it's like the right person was me. Yeah, the right project, this is working, but just the wrong timing. And some of these things are just kind of out of your control. It was just the wrong time for it. All these kind of like different components are just kind of lessons learned as I keep moving forward. And, I love consumable goods because ultimately I would be the happiest if I was making novelty products, just like, when the fidget spinners hit, I think my kids were like in elementary school, and just to see millions of those everywhere, I was like, man, that's what I want. I would love to design like a fidget spinner thing that like just hits for a second. It's ubiquitous and then it disappears. Like I love that kind of thing for whatever reason. So maybe one day.
It's very interesting because I get kind of drawn into these things, and AI kind of taught me this lesson once again. And the lesson that I tell people is you won't get lucky. And people are like, what do you mean by that? I said, well, every now and then, Justin and I we'll try and we'll make a clone of this thing, and we'll just be like a third one on the shelf, and we'll put some ad dollars behind it, and people who are unknowing will just pick our software over theirs, and we'll siphon off some of that category. Like Calendly comes to mind, right? Because they're making, I forget, some billions of dollars, and it's like, how many people, a lot of people don't know that's the household name. We'll just be the generic version of that. Something like that where I could just do, and it's a pretty easy software to run, especially at its most basic. But ultimately it doesn't, for whatever reason, those things never seem to work out for me. The fidget spinner, the other thing I look out for is I get a lot of those as an agency. We get these consumer products. I always say I kind of am not a huge fan of the B2C space for this reason, because you get a lot of people that are like, they're trying to make like a quick hit kind of consumer product. The biggest thing I say is, well, what are your marketing chops? Because like I've learned now that you have to be like liquid death good at marketing for something like that to really, really work. Otherwise, you better off building a business product that like solves a real problem, and the product does a lot of the marketing for you while you grow it.
Yeah, I totally. I mean, it's like a major sticking point to validation for me now is distribution. Like, how are you going to get customers? You know, like what, you can't just be like, you can't be product led anymore. You just can't. There's too much competition, especially around software. Because if it is good, like you're talking about, three people are going to knock it off immediately that have better distribution than you, and they win. You know, and that's heartbreaking. That's terrible. And that is kind of like a safe play too, because that reminds me of like the Sharper image catalog, you know, that I used to love as a kid. And you look in there and they have all these exotic, cool looking products, but really it's just like regular products that they put like a watch or a clock on it or something. It's like,
Yeah.
it's like this robe is luxurious and fluffy, but it also has speakers in it. And you're like, oh, you know, so I spent a lot of time trying to figure out like, okay, this is successful. This is successful. How do we put that into that? And now we got something new, you know, then that could be a smash hit, you know? And so there's a lot of folks out there looking for it. So like, you know, you're working on a project and you kind of have some soft limp launch. They're just gonna be like, dude, I can do this 10 times better and get it to customers faster. And you just lost, you know, that's
Well,
hard.
we see that even like forgetting even startups. I mean, Figma just had that happen with Claude. You know, I don't think Figma's out for the count, but everyone says like Claude Design just came out. So that's just another, like the competition is fierce, even at the top, even amongst public companies. It really never stops. I think that, you know, you brought up a good point before, which is I have to build products that I like. And I'm kind of trying to get back in touch with this, which is that idea of maybe the answer is to build, because I get advertised a lot of, I want to say like they're almost like old school products, like just really retro looking, like a tape recorder or like a Walkman. And there's a whole catalog of these. I forget the name of the site, but they have this very retro look, and I guess they know I like that kind of stuff. But I sort of look at it like, I'm wondering if the new thing is going to be the interface, the look, the feel of the product. Not that it's always been a thing, but we've kind of gone through this big kind of Spartan sense where it's like, just get the dang thing out there, validate that people want it, and it doesn't really matter how it looks, like Tailwind will make it look good enough kind of thing, or you could copy some UI kit. And I'm wondering if now we're sort of coming out of that, because like you said, everybody's kind of doing that now en masse. And what you see on Twitter, and it makes me laugh, is this build in public movement, because people are like, I'm making 10 grand a month off of this thing, 20 grand a month off of this thing. And a lot of folks are like, oh my God. And I'm over here kind of thinking like, that's actually not that much. Especially if your thing gets copied and now that 20 grand turns into 18, 15, 10, like you can't really retire off of that. You know, I think that there's a little bit of this idea like, oh, well, I'll be a solopreneur. And then you see people with like 40 different software products, and they all kind of have like 10, 5, 3 grand, and they kind of aggregate them. But for me, that feels like a little bit of a nightmare to try and manage, and to have to keep coming up with the next like consumable. Whereas I think that if you have a little bit of taste and a little bit of love for a single thing, or you build something that you would use, perhaps you get the idea of like hitting that multiple with it, where it becomes something that you can actually sink more time into. I think we're kind of in the age of the one-hit wonder, so to speak.
Yeah.
Ending.
You know, and totally, there is something to like, you know, at bats. You know, it's like, what's his name? Peter from OpenClaw. You know, OpenClaw was like his 78th product that he'd spun out since his exit from his last company. You know, so it's like, on one side, you got to keep getting those appearances at the plate, because that's how you get base hits, and so it starts to add up. But ultimately, you know, it's just really hard to know when to close the door and move on.
Well,
You know,
that's the one. That's something that Justin and I have talked about on our side, which is I'm like, listen, when it's a winner, it's going to be, you know, what's that famous product market fit quote? It's almost like I think it's like the way that Supreme Court defined pornography. It's like, I don't know how to define it, but I know it when I see it. You know, I think of the same thing. I say, you know, you might hit this product, it might get to 10 grand, it might get to 20, it may go up and down, but but when you hit it right, I think you know it when you see it. It really, that's my thought. And so I'm curious if you've ever kind of invested in or seen products like that where it was like, oh, this is whole, like they tried a bunch of things and then that was the thing and then it took off.
They nailed it. Yeah, that's what I'm really interested in building now, because, 12 months ago, like all the AI products was like kind of a shiny button in the corner that was like, add AI. It's like, you want fries with that kind of thing. And you're like, all right, what does that do? But now the products I'm interested in making, I'm kind of starting out with like, if I have to have a platform where people come to it and have to log in, I lost. I don't want to create anything that creates any friction with anything new. And that kind of hit me. I saw a couple of people doing it well, but also it was like it was like, I don't know, my cousin or something was like, oh, add me on Telegram. And I'm like, dude, what? Like, I don't want to have
Telegram.
Can't you just be on like WhatsApp or something like, or Instagram? Like, I got to have another thing. And so
Yep.
I was like, all right. And it was like so begrudgingly, I added it and I talked to him for like one day. And then now I see Telegram on my screen. I'm like, dude, I'm never going to that. I don't care what my cousin has to say, and I think a lot of people are like that. So you can kind of read the room a little bit, what's happening with agentic AI and what's happening with API calls, like where everybody, I just want to build my own dashboards and make my own UIs the way I want it, to spec and change it on a daily basis. Really, I just need the data. And I want the data to provide an outcome. And otherwise, I don't care. You know what I mean? I don't want to log in with Google. You know what I'm saying? Like I want it to be as frictionless and smooth and where I am already. Come to me.
Right.
I'm tired of coming to you. So, this is like, it's an impossible task almost. It's like you're starting to work on software projects of like, okay, I'm not asking them to come to me. I'm going to them. Like, how is this going to look? But that's really kind of what I'm obsessed with in product-wise right now.
Yeah, you bring up a product that someone mentioned to me, the same kind of style, which is a chat that unifies all the chats. So it's like Slack, Discord, Telegram, WhatsApp. I got people on all of those things. Signal is the other one that people use, right? All these. And I really don't want to have all of them. I just want to go to one place. I'm trying to communicate, but everyone's got one that's their preference. And do we kind of move towards these almost universal? And I think maybe MCP is starting to take that. But some people are like, oh, it's just APIs, and maybe it's a little bit more than that. I don't know. The idea though is generally a protocol that we can all interact with the services through. Now the question is, do the services want to allow you to do that? But I agree, like the idea that I had to make an account with Telegram and like make up another password, and then I find out that Telegram got all their passwords stolen or something. Not that they did, I'm just saying then you find out through your password manager like, oh, it looks like you were in an exposure, and so the more software you interact with, it creates a lot of not just friction in terms of the things you have to sign up for. It's just a lot of cognitive load too. It's just where's this message coming from? Oh, I messaged you on WhatsApp. Oh, you don't really use WhatsApp, so I didn't respond to your message. I'm sorry about that. How am I supposed to keep up with all of this? And then the social media is the other one. If you've ever tried to build any kind of like social media posting product, it is a miserable, like getting certified through like I look at the stuff we use now to post and I go, oh, that's the moat. Getting certified with Meta is the moat.
Totally.
It's such a painful process to do because I thought, well, how hard could it be? I'll just integrate with them all. I don't want to pay a SaaS provider for that. They make it so painful to get through that process that you're like, you know what? It actually has nothing to do with the coding. It has everything to do with this being really painful to get API access and to make it all work. But I do dream of this idea that there's almost going to be like a fabric of APIs that we can all just integrate with. And like you said, we're giving a talk tomorrow on this. The UI can be what you want it to be, and it's almost like the OS of you. And in some ways, I feel like there was the dream of crypto being kind of like this too, like the universal, maybe even all my data, like I own all my data and it only goes to the places when it's needed, but it sticks with me. There's a whole new world of computing that could be formed around this. I just don't know if the powers that be are going to be psyched on. That's their moat, your data, the things they know about you, making you come back to their platform.
Yeah. Why am I still paying 2.9% merchant service fees on everything? It's like, this is ridiculous. What happened to Bitcoin? Where's the Bitcoin future I was promised?
I know. And now
Yeah,
it's like, yeah, it's, oh my God. Crypto was another one that went very, very south. And unfortunately, again, one of those things where I'm hoping to get lucky one day because I've got a little bit of, but I think that my moment to get lucky already passed. Like I already got lucky with the a little bit I made initially, and I had to go bigger at that time, and I just don't have that penchant for risk. I'm not a gambler like that. I would much rather build businesses. At least then it's like, even though it's a gamble, it feels like I'm in control, if that
totally.
makes any sense.
I'm
So
exactly the same. I did promise my wife I wouldn't invest in startups anymore, but to me, the risk is far greater. But like to me, like investing in stocks, I'm just like, dude, I got to do like investment funds and stuff because if I see that those candles going up and down every day, it makes me a nervous wreck.
yep, yep.
There's an
And the other,
illusion of control with business.
and that's the other thing. Like the stock market is very much like the feeling of the market, which is just such a weird. Um, I don't know. It's a weird thing to be invested. Like some people feel very comfortable with that. I feel like with startup investing, because we've done a little bit of startup investing too, you really analyze the business itself and the customer base and do they love the product. Whereas with the market, you sort of are like, well, they're a big company. They're pretty good. Like that kind of thing. Like, when the doors were falling off Boeing, I thought, I'm going to buy some Boeing because they're not going to let that thing fail, and, well, then there was Spirit Airlines, but that's that's a story for
Yeah.
another day. But I said, they're not going to let Boeing go down, right? It actually turned out to be a good bet on my part, but it was not based like, market sentiment at the time was like, do not invest in the plane company that the doors are falling off of. It wasn't really based on anything other than I had a feeling that they would figure it out and then the stock would jump back up again. But with startups, you really get to get into the business and what's the product? Is this going to be groundbreaking for people? What are the founders like? And so that, I guess, would be my next question for you is what are the things you look for in the founders when you're looking to invest in these companies?
That's something that I've been asking a lot on my podcast. Like what are the attributes of successful founders now? There's maybe using the kind of like Web 2.0, for example, all the burgeoning trillionaires, whether it's your Elons, your Zucks, your Bezoses, your Sam Altmans, like these folks all have similar kind of characteristics and personalities, which would be kind of like autistic and maybe psychopathic, kind of that blend. There's a blend of spectrum and psychopathic tendencies that turned out to make them the most rich people on planet Earth. But I have a feeling that like that mix won't last. I mean, I think the attributes I really admire about those folks is just the persistence and the dedication to skill. And I mean, I'm kind of making fun of these guys a little bit, but like truly, like what they've done is absolutely remarkable. If you think about like that horrible moment when Zuckerberg is like on trial with the Senate and they're asking him about tubes and internets and things like that, it's admirable to have to stand up there and defend your product like that. I look up to that. So when I'm thinking about like what's coming next, one, because hopefully I can embody some some of those attributes of like a successful founder, but also, my daughter's a freshman in college. She's studying finance, and I know her future is in entrepreneurship because she's just built for it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so it's like, okay, what are the things that will help? I think that there's certain things that will always go far. If you're looking for leadership in entrepreneurship, which is what we were talking about earlier, just sales ability, the ability to sell yourself first, the ability to like build trust, the ability to instill that enthusiasm and energy in your organization. I
Right.
think one of the hardest things to do is get somebody to care about anything. Especially if you care about something and you want them to care what you care about. It's so hard to get that through an organization. And somebody like Elon is unbelievable at it, about recruiting and retaining the most brilliant, like talented people on planet Earth and getting them to rally around insanely ambitious goals. It's like 10 years ago, he's talking about going to Mars. You're like, dude, whatever, man. Maybe next lifetime. And like we're like stepping up to that. We're getting close to it. We have rockets that catch themselves and land and like all kinds of robots and whatever. And there's an army of Elon robots that are coming that they're building in the factories right now. So I think probably that would be the number one attribute I'm looking at in founders is the ability to rally people around a mission and get them to care. If you can do that, boy, you can kind of take over anything.
It's sort of interesting because when you look at Elon, I don't see him as being that way, which is sort of like I don't, when I see him on television and see him speak, it's hard for me to picture him rallying the troops. Whereas I always found like a Steve Jobs, for instance, I would argue that he's kind of like the opposite. Like he didn't have that. I mean, maybe he had psychopathic tendencies. If you read his
Yeah,
biography,
kind of a tyrant.
they're right. But when you saw him do the thing, get up and do the presentation, and you were like, wow, he's really good at this marketing thing. He really knows. Like he was very good at speaking in front of people. Whereas like seeing Elon do like SNL or something like that was a little bit like you're like. Like but he's very inspiring in a different kind of way. I think just because he actually tackles the ambitious goals, and it's sort of interesting because Steve Jobs was very well-rounded. I would say he wasn't the world's best engineer. Wozniak was arguably not arguably, he was the engineer kind of behind it, but he kind of brought all the different disciplines together to build this thing. Whereas I don't know if Elon has that sense, or I don't know what founder we have today. Like when I look at the AI founders of today, I don't know if we have, even Bezos really, I think he's really good at building, had a great vision for Amazon, but I wouldn't argue that it's like the world's most beautiful. Like, it's not going to make it into any design magazines. That's for sure. It's not going to be remembered that way. So sometimes I wonder, like, where are we losing some kind of the aesthetic value? So I don't know, like it's almost like a little bit of that. The thing that made Jobs very special was there was an artistry behind the things he was building that he brought into the things, and I feel like we're missing that in a big way in our world today.
Yeah, and it's important that it's beautiful, like in Jobs. Joni Ives, he hired Joni Ives and just absolutely nailed it by being minimal and removing everything unnecessary. So you have like all this like beautiful, elegant tools, which I'm super into that. I guess, you could kind of squint your eyes and see how Bezos made something beautiful with procurement, because I tell you what, if I order a toothbrush at 10 a.m. and I'm brushing my teeth for lunch, that's kind of beautiful.
It's kind of incredible. That's what I said. He's got like the process side. Everybody kind of takes the things they bring to the table and makes it real. And I think that, Satya coming into Microsoft, I would argue they didn't capture the beauty piece, but he also seems to have captured a little bit more of the process side of things and kind of improved that company. Although now who knows, with AI, things have gotten so crazy. It seems like there were companies that I thought were oh, these guys are doing amazing things. I'll tell you, I see underdogs all day coming in and kind of taking the cake. I mean, I'm on a Linux machine now. I switched to Linux last year because I got really psyched on the aesthetic of what DHH was doing, and then with Omarchi, and then I saw the Framework laptop just the other. I saw that there was the new Dell XPS, and then Framework just released a Framework Pro, and I thought that looks so cool. It's so different. I want that. And I ended up with the Framework desktop because I was just craving something different in this sort of sea of sameness. And so the thing I kind of think about with some founders is maybe the answer isn't to try to be like Elon, because I don't even know if you or I will ever meet that. But there's just such a rare person. You could do very, very well. Maybe hitting half a trillion. So bad. Half.
My God, I would tap out long before then.
Right? So, sometimes I think I go, maybe I'm not looking, maybe as investables, we're not looking for those people. We're looking for, maybe it is something in the aesthetics. Maybe it's, and you talked about, these were the folks that were historically very, very successful. Is success going to switch almost to like the creative act? Are we entering is the era where the artist sort of rules coming up? Because now AI is democratizing what would have taken so many years to develop the skills on these machines and across all these different disciplines. And if you wanted to be a designer, you had to learn all the Adobe programs. If you wanted to be a programmer, you had to learn all these things about hardware and software. And now you can learn those things a lot faster, and you should still learn those things, but now you can actually kind of have a broader base, almost like the rebirth of the Renaissance man, so to speak. I think about like the Da Vinci or a Michelangelo who could really do art on all these different mediums. I'm wondering what's that kind of going to look like when it gets applied to entrepreneurship, and as kind of what we would have seen as more traditional businesses falls over, gets taken over by bots. What rises in its place? Does the differentiator become the artistry?
Yeah. I've actually been thinking a lot about that. We're talking about success. We're talking about building beautiful project or products. What are the attributes? And I look at like these guys, these trillionaires, and I don't want any part of that. I guess it's no surprise that the guy that wants to make pet rocks doesn't want to have a mission to Mars, But it seems like a disaster. Like I've been really interested in kind of the little sneaky millionaires out there. You're talking about like, that 0 to 1 million is such a fun ride, and getting that stabilized is, then you immediately start looking at like, okay, 3 to 5, what's it going to take to get to there? But these folks that are sitting at a $1 million run rate, 40% margins, it's pretty chill. It's pretty chill, and if you strung together 3 or 4 of those companies, you're doing real good.
That's it. Yeah, I'm very interested in private equity for that reason. Like as a acquisition for us, as like even just doing that in the future for myself. Like maybe it is bringing together a few different service businesses. But I like, do I have to be the trillionaire? Right? That's
yeah. Seems like a nightmare.
It seems very right. It's right. It seems very, very miserable. It doesn't seem. I guess I enjoy life too much. Maybe that's it. You're from Colorado. You look out at those mountains every day. I don't imagine Elon gets much time to go climbing. Or to just like dip his hands in the water and wash his face in the lake. And I don't think that's, maybe it just doesn't desire it, and
Sure.
that's okay. But I think that there's something that you'll lose when you don't have that.
Well, I mean, that kind of ambition is a curse. It really is, because it's what Buddhists will call the realm of the hungry ghost. Like there's not enough you can eat that will ever satiate you. So I like to like sit with that and really think about, what do I want? And because the interesting thing, and I'm so blessed in my life that everything I've wanted, I've got. So, when you put it in that lens, then you better be really sure about what you're going for, because you just might get it, and at least in my case, everything I've wanted, I've got. So, if I'm sitting here today and I'm like, man, I really like my lifestyle. Like I want to sink into that. I want to sink into the things that I do and like what makes me happy, and really shoot for that. And if there's like a next level, to be careful that it's not just like a moving goalpost. That like, okay, now we want the $20 million company. And like, you get there and you're like, I need a $100 million company. And now you're in the realm of the hungry ghost demon, and you're never going to be happy. So, for me, it's important to have this benchmark that if I have XYZ liquid capital, I'm good, and I can sustain the kind of lifestyle I want for me and my family for the rest of all time, and I'm done. And what done means is that I do exactly what I do now, just with a little bit of gold chains around my neck. You know what I'm saying? Maybe a diamond grill. I want to look like Lil Jon with a pimp cup and like a cane, and then I'm good to go, man. What else do I need?
It's funny you mention that, because it reminds me of when I was in college. I was very, very much obsessed. I mean, I still rock climb to this day, but I remember at that time, every time I'd climb a new grade, I'd have the next project in mind. I had to climb the next grade and the next grade and the next grade, and I'd have to go out there and I'd work on it, and then I'd succeed, and then I'd get a whole bunch, and I'd build this like kind of pyramid, right? Which with each grade I'd do more and more of them, and at some point I always had this one specific climb in mind, and I had looked at it for years, and I said, man, I always, it just was, that was it, that was the pinnacle in my mind, and one day I did it. It took years, but I finally was good enough to send it. And so a lot of people sort of say, in the entrepreneurial sense, maybe the Elon sense, they go, well, now you'll just pick the next one, right? It'll just keep going. I did not experience that at all. I
Nice.
experienced immense loss, actually. Like,
Really?
this thing was, I didn't want to do the next grade. I was like, that was the one. And then once it was done, I was like, now what do I do? And so I was sort of like graduating school at the same time. One of the coolest things was I had achieved a level really where I could climb at any area in the world and feel and like enjoy it and like really enjoy it. No, I wasn't going to climb the hardest climb in the area, but I could enjoy a plethora of climbs, whether they were on rope, traditional. And I was enjoying myself, and I was climbing with these people, but I said, I don't know what I want to do with my life. I'm graduating college. I got this degree, but I never really, I still don't know what I want to do. And the person I was climbing with at the time said to me, well, maybe you should think about what you want to contribute instead of what you want to do. I remember this moment because here I am. This is, 20 years ago. I still sometimes think about that because I still don't know if I figured that I don't know if I have a very clean answer to that question. But when it comes to building my business, I kind of remember that grade chasing. And I think sometimes we chase the revenue. We constantly are measuring ourselves by the revenue. But then sometimes I have to take that step back and say, well, what do I want to contribute? And when I look at Elon, I actually think that's the question he keeps trying to answer. I think he accidentally ended up a trillionaire. I think that he looks at it like, well, what do I want to leave behind? And inevitably, that led him to these crazy goals. And not that that's going to lead you to these crazy goals, but sometimes I think focusing on the stuff, the financial, and it's hard when you have a family to not focus on those things. But I've always come back to that question is if I can try to stay true, if I cannot get sucked into the, oh my God, am I going to pay for this? I got the mortgage, I got this, or I want the gold chain, the cup. But if I could get back to that, what do I want to contribute? Is my company on the mission? The money's going to follow that.
Yeah. Yeah. And money's awesome, but it's like, how much do you actually need? I mean, I guess if you're going to Mars, you gotta have a lot of money. But
Yeah.
it's like, I don't know, man. You get to a certain place in your life and you're just like, do I like vacations? I don't. I don't like traveling. I like hunting and fishing. I live in Colorado. That's what I'm going to do. If I had $1 trillion, I wouldn't have time to go hunting and fishing the way I like to. Do I like to go out to eat? Not really. I like to cook. You know what I mean? So like if I'm sitting at home and I'm, reverse searing a ribeye and I got a bottle of wine on the table and, playing a little Charles Mingus on my record player, it's literally heaven. It's not going to get better than that. And so like at some point it's like mitigating like the distraction from that. It's almost like silencing the ambition. Now that's also a ridiculous thing to say because I'm insanely ambitious and I love money. So,
It's you haven't stopped. You've kept going, right? You
of
sold your
course.
company. You probably could have stopped, and you're like, I'm doing another one because what else are you going to do? You got to fill your time on this rock with something. And I think that that's part of where we derive a lot of our satisfaction to is the toil, so to speak.
To-
That you got to work
Absolutely.
at.
To that point, I talk to a dozen different founders a week, and the ones I'm always interested in are the people that have those like giant, $100 million plus exits, $500,000 or $500 million. Guy is a banker, sold a bank, $850 million, and he's talking to me about his new AI tool. And I'm like, bro, why? Why are you doing it? And the answer is always the same. They're addicted to the game, you know? They're addicted to the game and you got to do something. And these are the kind of people that like you get $850 million because you are relentless in pursuing what you want. And like, so they're going to do that. So I'm just hoping that I would be able to cross that bridge and not be addicted to the game, but what I found so far is it is a moving goal. You're like, okay, $100 and I'm done. $1,000 I'm done. $10,000 I'm done. It just keeps going. And you just chalk it up to your head, be like, well, inflation, technically $100 is $1,000 now. So
Yeah, well, it goes back to that feeling of loss after I was sent that. I said sometimes I think that the struggle was put in front of me, because God knows I probably wouldn't do anything if I was rich. So like I said, he's like, you would not do the Elon. You literally would waste away.
Hell yeah.
And hang out with it. And so like a lot of people would do that. So sometimes we have to recognize in ourselves that like needing like that financial need, and it's not asking for too much. That's actually driving you and putting you more on the path of, what are you supposed to contribute to this world? What is your contribution going to be? How are you going to leave this place a little better than when you came into it? And that's a very tough question to answer, I think, when you really, really think about it.
I think I have an answer to that question.
I'd love to hear it.
I think the only thing that you can do is just raise your kids with full of love and give them all the opportunities you possibly can. Maybe I'm just a little bit pessimistic about being able to change the rudder of the course of human history, and doing big things sometimes can explode in your face. A lot of times, I like to think ambitiously and big, but what I'll do is be like, how can I make sure I do no harm first? Like, my first goal is I will not do any harm, and then that will kind of temper down some of the like loftier goals, because it's like, to get to here, like what did the Joker say? You got to crack some eggs to make an omelet or whatever. It's like, I refuse to do that. So then it becomes like, well, what can you do? Well, I can lead by example for my children, so that they're able to lead, for example, for their children. And if you're taking kind of a seventh generation task, that actually results in like an amazing influence on the planet. So it's really, like that saying says, the big stuff treat lightly, and the light stuff treat bigly, for lack of a better word. And I think that's really real. Again, it butts up against my own kind of competitive and ambitious nature to be like, dude, the big things are important, the small things are important, which is kind of a cliche, but I think it really is important. So you got kids, Mike?
I do. I have 3, and it's so funny you mentioned that story, because we actually had a little bit of a near-death experience with an Airbnb 2 weeks ago. And I did an episode on this moment, but there was a gas leak, and I happened to have woken up and like detect, and the detector was up, and I was down in the basement, and I hear it faintly, and I had to get everybody out of the house. It was like the middle of the night. Called the fire department. They were like, "Thank God you got out." And it's so funny now. I want to travel with a carbon monoxide detector, because he's like, "You guys were in." I have 3 kids, and I'll tell you, the following day was the most beautiful day of my entire life. I'm talking like you just had a near life experience, and the thing that you just mentioned, I thought, I already have everything. If I lost the business, everything financially in ruin, I've already got everything. And in fact, if that was the trade-off, I would have traded everything that I have to keep my family safe. And you don't really realize it until you have a moment like that.
Man, that's terrifying. Yeah, and it's so true. It's like, I talk to my kids about that sometimes. It's like, hey man, like, count your blessings. There's fates worse than death. Sometimes death is an escape. They're like, yeah, you lose like all those people, and my heart just goes out to them when something terrible like that does happen to people, and you're just like, bro.
I know. Well, that's the thing. Like even coming out of it, I thought, in fact, I thought, if all of us die in a carbon monoxide leak, that's not the worst. The worst is if my wife and I, because we're adults, are fine, and our kids have something, and our kids, you think of all the scenarios in your head, and you're like, oh my God, there was like, that was such a near miss. And again, you come back to this. I just kind of came back in to life, and I thought, thank God we're okay. And there are more important things, but you get caught up sometimes in all these, especially when you're in business, you get caught up in the wrong things. And sometimes it takes something like that to just course correct you. And like you said, I think about that. Like, if I never make a ton of money, my kids don't care. They're just going to remember if I love them or not. My parents didn't make a ton of money. It's generations of people whose parents, but they left them with wisdom. You garner wisdom, and it's really not about that. And I think that's kind of the piece of business that's that becomes so hard, because it does make you a little bit, you have to be financially conscious to be in this game. It's like the part of it, but it takes a little bit from you every time.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's hard to tell your kids no too, you know.
Yeah. It's very hard. It's very hard, especially these days, because I mean, God, everything is so accessible. They're just like, yeah, just go on your phone, order it. It'll be here. Like you said, the toothbrush, it'll be here by 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
It's not that expensive, $10, $3, and you're just like, wait a minute. There's just the abundance. I'm not sure we've headed to a good place there either, but we got to create synthetic scarcity now.
Oh, absolutely. Well, as they get older, the desires are more. Dad, can I get some Jordans? I'm like, oh, sure. They send me a link, $450 for some Jordans. I'm like, oh, you must be out of your mind. And they get upset a little bit, like, oh, but I want them. I'm like, eat your pancakes.
Yeah. No way, no way. It's
Eat your pancake. Talk about it later.
Man, I haven't even gotten. Yeah, my kids are young still. They're 8, 6, and 1. And
Oh,
so,
cool, man.
yeah,
The
we're
littles,
in
I'm
the
jelly.
best time.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're in the best time, and I say that's one of those. I always try and make time. The family vacations are very important. No matter how crazy anything gets, I'm like, we are going to regret not doing these things because things go where they go. Definitely, that was definitely one of the better decisions was having children when I did, and not like focusing on the business and stuff like just because you don't get that time back.
I'm glad you said that too. I'm a big advocate of having kids. It's kind of like popular now that people are like, I'm not having kids or whatever. I'm like, dude, that's the worst decision you could possibly make. It's like you want to lock in, have kids. You want a little joy dispensary, have kids. It's the best thing you can possibly do. All the biological rewards are right there for you being a parent. It's great. And it's funny you said vacations. I've learned over the years that I send my family on vacations without me because I ruin it. I'm just a curmudgeon. You don't want to see me at like Lego World or Disneyland. Like I am not fun to be around. So they go do that. Dad's time is garbage time. And garbage time is 11:30 at night. We're going to make a pizza and just talk trash about whatever's on TV. Like that's what I love. I don't like quality time. I like garbage time.
Very cool. Very cool. I love that. Yeah, I've definitely, we're definitely big Disney. Like where I go to Disney, I enjoy it. The biggest reason though is I think there's a nostalgia because I still drive down from New York to Florida
Beautiful.
every year with my kids. I did it with my parents and my brothers. My mother did it with her family. There's just like a nostalgia to doing it, and so I always say like the car ride's a part of the experience. People are like, wow, you don't want to fly down. I'm like, no, it's a part of the experience.
No, this is it. That's the good part. Yeah.
I was like, I like this. I love when you like finally hit the South and the roads kind of open up and it's all sunny and you start seeing the palm trees. I know that they appreciate it, but they're going to appreciate it even more when they get older, just like I did.
100%. Yeah, man. And I love that. And, Disneyland is actually a great place. If I wasn't such a jerk, I'd probably have more fun. But I think back on the vacations have been really impactful. I went on a hunting trip once with my daughter. We did 5 days of elk hunting and she was 14. Wow. She was 14 and she was doing 16-hour days in the woods, in the snow, silent with me. It was just great. And she loves that kind of thing, so it's like when you want to go on a dad's vacation, it's only fun in retrospect. While you're doing it, it's actually horrible.
That is rock climbing in a nutshell. That tends to be mountaineering in a nutshell.
That's climbing for sure. You're like,
I'm glad I'm on the ground, and I'm going to talk about that for years. But when I was on that thing, that was not enjoyable.
That was terrible. Yeah. That's great.
Those days are coming. Those days are coming for sure. That's why I said I'm in the little kids days, but that my son's done some climbing with me and it's been great. So that's what I can't wait for, going to Utah, doing that kind of stuff and taking them in and around, like doing slot canyons and having just crazy adventures. Just so good. But Ryan, we're about an hour now. What I love to do to kind of round out the episode is I always ask people, and I think you've kind of already answered this question a little bit with having kids, but are there any other pieces of advice that you'd give to young folks today entering the job market? Because usually I ask about young engineers, but I would say just for anybody in your case, what would be your piece of advice?
Yeah, young folks entering the job market, I've given this a lot of consideration because, my kids are kind of getting ready for that, particularly if they're listening to this podcast, they'll probably have an interest in entrepreneurship. They'll probably have an interest in going out on their own and figuring it out on their own. I would really encourage that. Having a job is terrible. It's it's an awful thing, and it is an American institution to start your own business and figure it out yourself. And a lot of times, you need a mother bird to kind of push you out of the nest. Maybe this conversation could be inspiring like that, but you'll learn how to fly on the way down. Now, that being said, if you have a job, hold on to the job. You need revenue sources. So they're called side hustles for a reason, but keep it going. Learn everything you can. Find all the resources you can. If I could be a resource, you want to pick my brain, I'm always open to that. And I love founders and entrepreneurs, particularly young ones, because I think some of their ideas are squashed unnecessarily. So that being said, have a place for your ideas. Write them all down. It could be a terrible idea for a natural deodorant or a terrible cookie company or a horrible Blillo. But the fact of the matter is where ideas come from is kind of mysterious. And the place where good ideas and bad ideas come from is the same place. And if you don't respect the bad ideas to give them a place to live, to give them a little bit of room to breathe, then you're not going to get the good ideas, So if you got a bad idea, don't feel bad about it. People are going to squash your dreams and try and crush you for your terrible ideas. But if you show it a little bit of respect and you can move away onto a good idea, they come from the same place.
Very, very cool. I totally agree with that. And I love that that's advice that my co-founder and I give all the time, because we moonlit this agency for a long time, is keep your day job, work hard in the evenings. Like, don't put yourself in financial strain. Like, don't put yourself in this place where you're so worried about where your next meal is going to come from that you can't think straight. Sometimes it's nice to get the business off the ground, have your income taken care of, and you learn things as you go, just being thrifty and kind of just working those jobs. And then last question is, do you recommend any books, life-changing books for people to read?
Life-changing books? Any subject? We talking about business books?
It can really be any subject. Yeah, it can be any subject. You can even give 2 or 3 if you wanted to, different, but I always say I leave it open-ended because you never know.
You bet. I like Built to Sell. That's a great one for books. I like Gino Wickman's stuff as far as business stuff goes. I am like kind of an old West buff. I like 19th century American literature, whether it's nonfiction or fiction. So I love Cormac McCarthy stuff. I read the autobiography of Kit Carson.
Wow.
This guy is worth checking out, man. He probably killed like 26 people and was like, a scout in the army. He was promoted all the way up to general. I think that is a formality in his later years, but really just kind of lived in that old West era, kind of traveling the country from, the East Coast through Texas and Mexico, through California, Colorado. There's a town in Colorado that has his namesake, but the biography of Kit Carson is this really interesting narrative that pulls a lot of the different threads together from that time period, whether it's kind of the Indian Wars or what was happening with the Lakota up north, and it's brilliant. I love that stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, I love it. I love I love kind of bringing a book from outside the business world into it too, because I do think it's important to spend time with other material. That this was something that we've talked about, is like, where does taste come from? And I think inevitably it's not from studying business. It's from everything else in the world, and you can build a lot of taste from that.
Yeah. Well, and business is really hard, and sometimes, you have weird relationships, and it's fun to fantasize about being a gunslinger sometimes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I love it. On horseback and doing the thing. That would be. I mean, I couldn't imagine traveling through like the mountains of Colorado when there was no Loveland Pass, no roads. Like,
yeah, right.
Like kind of wild to think about, man. Talk about feats of human engineering. So
100%. Yeah. Very grateful for that. The
that's
Glenwood Canyon whole highway system, absolutely gorgeous and much better than taking a train.
yeah, yeah. Oh my God. I can't wait to get back out. My wife and I have been talking about it, like when it's time to kind of bring the kids up and do a trip, whether it's going to be skiing or it's going to be climbing, I don't know. That's the skiing is second to none, but Colorado climbing will always have a special place in my heart. I love springtime.
Pretty darn good. Well, I like to consider myself the governor of Colorado. So if you're coming out here, let me know. I'll make sure it's an amazing time for you and your fam.
Amazing, amazing. Thanks so much, Ryan. This has been a great episode, and we will talk again soon.
Appreciate you, Mike. Thank you.